either live by the gun or you die by the sword.
Time for sperm-shaped things.
Welcome to The Good, the Bad, and the Weird. I'm Nico.
And I'm Chris.
And today we are diving into probably one of my favorite realms of film. We are diving into the very weird art house films.
Art is a great way to describe this.
Yes. We are doing actually our first David Lynch movie and David Lynch's first movie, Eraserhead.
Yes.
Yeah.
One that people know the name, but maybe haven't seen.
Yeah, because that's one thing that I have come across with Eraserhead is that either people saw it a long time ago and kind of forgot about it.
Fair.
Or people know the image of that's on every DVD cover.
It is a very good still.
And know it's weird, but never have seen it.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's people like me who saw it and are absolutely enamored by it.
Yes. Which is why I think art is the best way to describe Eraserhead.
Yes. So, for those who don't know, Eraserhead is a 2007 fantasy horror film. And yes, we're doing a horror film outside of the spooky season, but we are getting close.
Is it 2007 or is it 1977?
That's my bad. It is 1997. I wrote my notes down wrong. It is written and directed by 1977. Sorry, written and directed by David Lynch.
Yes. And edited by David Lynch.
Yes, he did absolutely everything about this. It stars Jack Nance and Charlotte Stewart.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing I do want to bring up about them is that in this movie, Lynch wanted to use no-name actors and actresses.
I like that he says that, and the pretentiousness of this will make more sense in a little bit when we go through, like, when and why he was making this film, but, like, yeah, of course they were no-name actresses, you student.
Well, so yes and no. So he wanted to, and also on top of that, like, everyone who's involved in this film seemed to be, like, someone of someone he knew.
Yeah, definitely.
But of them, Charlotte Stewart was actually known at the time as Ava on Little House on the Prairie. Yes.
Yeah. A different group of watchers, though, I would argue.
Oh, definitely. Especially with, like, some of the stuff she said about, like, taking her or her brother and her brother's kids to the movie. Yeah.
Yep.
And on the surface level, because we'll get into this, Eraserhead is about a man living in an industrial world with his girlfriend and newborn child.
Boy, that sounds so much better than
what it
is actually about.
That is the base, like, very string line.
That is the phrase that you say to people who you're trying to trick into watching this film.
Oh, yes. It very much makes me think of how I somewhat tricked Brian, Philip, and Elijah into watching Ichi the Killer.
Yeah, that's very accurate.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, that statement isn't wrong. It is about those things, but it's about those things in the same way that a full white canvas is about a polar bear in a snowstorm.
Yeah.
Like, you're not wrong, but there's more.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And Lynch even describes Eraserhead as a dream of dark and troubling things.
Yes, and the more you get into Lynch, the more you realize why this is not often called a movie. This is called a film.
Yes.
All the time, everywhere, because this man is, like, the most artsy of artsy fuckers.
He is the term that I like is an auteur. He's very much like Stanley Kubrick, where it's a David Lynch film. It's a Stanley Kubrick film. Like,
he reminds me, he gives me vibes of what, like, it must have been like to have, like, some of the great painters alive, where you're like, wow, you did an entire series of blue things and chopped your own ear off. You sound fun.
Yeah.
He feels like he fits into that kind of, like, artistic person, where this isn't just, like, him art, this, like, his life is in a whole different realm.
Yeah, the more I learn about David Lynch, the more I inspire to be his level of madness. Because it's a very subdued and controlled madness.
Yes.
It's
and
a madness with reason, and it's a thought-out madness.
And it's a explored madness.
Yes.
As he, and Eraserhead was kind of, for him, the public start of that exploration of madness.
Yes. And so, before we get into everything, what are we drinking today, Chris?
Whatever the hell we want.
Yes, there is no drinks in this movie, and it has been a busy week.
It has been a busy week, and while I'm sure we could figure out a drink that is inspired by this film, all of them would have been gross.
I thought of doing, like, the Mind Melter, like, shots at the beginning, but, I forgot. So you're drinking water, and I have whiskey and Coke and a truly hard iced tea for backup.
There we go.
Erasing my own mind. Cheers.
Cheers.
And I ruined a good opportunity for a pun. I erased my own head.
Ah.
So, also before we get into the film itself, I do want to go through a brief history of the making of Eraserhead, because it is rather interesting, but it is also important as a whole, as Eraserhead is a student film, and a lot of people forget or don't realize that.
And I think once you realize, the, like, process that went into this, the time frame that went into this, it makes the visuals more, it makes them feel correct, as opposed to if you watch this movie blind without knowing any of this background, the entire premise of this movie can pretty easily go over you. Yes,
exactly. And so, Eraserhead itself was made over the course of several years.
A lot of years.
While Lynch was a student at the American Film Institute Center for Advanced Film Studies. But Lynch himself does not remember the concept of Eraserhead really starting there, other than, like, he was inspired by his experiences in Philadelphia, because he had a very hard time living there.
Yeah, from interviews and the book that came with the DVD, sounded like he lived in kind of a shithole in Philadelphia, which he was living there while being stressed in a new situation in one of the rougher parts of town, in a new town.
Yeah.
Which didn't end well on his mind. Like, it really set a tone for him that he portrayed very strongly in this film.
Yes. And so, Eraserhead also came about because after his first year at the Institute, he had started working on a film called Garden Back.
Yes, based off of a painting, I think.
Yeah, and it was about this man's sexual desires and how, like, he became more insect-like, and, like, the garden on his mushrooms on his back grew more and more. But there was complications, and he hated the project because it wasn't becoming what he wanted.
He had a lot of professor input.
Yes.
And he isn't a fan of input.
Yeah, he is very much one of those artists. I will say artists.
Yeah, no, artists. And, like, there are directors who we compare to artists, but Lynch is one of those few ones who started out as an artist and then was like, I am bored with canvas, time to move on to film.
That's very much how it feels like. And so, after the second year started, he was put in first year classes again, and he just wasn't having it, and he felt insulted, so he quit the Institute, and
they panicked a little bit.
I don't think they really panicked as much. I think
there was definitely one or two professors who, whether or not they stated it at the time, or if this was them retrospecting and being professory where they say something that didn't happen.
We knew his ingenuity. It was just a clerical error.
Yes, yeah. I ran into that sort of quotes a couple of times where there was multiple professors or people in the university saying, oh no, he was one of our best and brightest, and we are so sad that he felt that way.
I call a lot of bullshit on that.
As someone who went through an artsy school myself, I also call bullshit, because no.
Yeah, well, there's other stuff, like, later on about the process that Lynch talks about. But he was called back because the dean liked him, and... I
mean, that goes a long way.
The dean thought he was one of the promising students from the get-go, and he realized that if Lynch left, there was something wrong with the school, because Lynch and another guy left.
Yeah.
And he's like, so what do you want to do? And Lynch came back and said...
I want to make my own goddamn film.
Well, he's like, I don't want to do Garden Back anymore. I want to do Eraserhead.
Which... props to the one person, it sounds like, who actually had the sense to be like, oh, people are leaving, and it's not because, they want to pursue other things. It's because we suck.
Yeah.
Like, that's big shoes. I appreciate that. But there was a lot of other stuff.
That, and to give some, I guess, defense to the Academy, Lynch was part of, like, their second class of the Institute. So, like,
yeah, there wasn't a lot going on.
They were still trying to figure shit out.
Oh, for sure, because I feel like most universities try to have some form of deadline, a timeline, a progress report even on how you're doing. And there's parts of this movie that took him a full year to film one scene.
Yeah. Yeah. And so Lynch ended up finishing his complete script in 1971. The dean himself didn't like the script, but
I have a theory.
Okay.
Because I ran into that a couple times where people kept saying that the script that he turned in was like hella short.
Yeah, so it was only like a 40-something page. Like it was a short script. And
so people thought it was going to be a short movie.
Yeah, and so Lynch is like, no, I kind of see it at being maybe an hour and a half. And so like it feels like he turned in a short like haiku style poem and was like, this is going to be my full-length movie, and like no one understood that. It's very much so like how action movies are generally 70-some pages because there's so much action in between. Because for those who don't know, generally a page of in a screenplay is 1 minute of film. Yeah, so and like you're trying to be fairly detailed, not too detailed, because you want to have the actors fill in, and you know, a lot of it is visual, but you do have to write out like all the dialogue or all of the scenes. And Lynch didn't do that. Which specifically with the Eraserhead has very little dialogue to begin with. Almost so little that you could argue that this might even be considered a silent film. Like, there's almost no dialogue. Yeah, which I think is... Oh, I like it. Yeah, it is. But... it is refreshing. Yes. But despite the dean not liking the script, he felt it was still important that Lynch do what he wanted. I mean, you don't want to kick the guy out twice. Well, on top of that, and here's why I think everyone outside of, like, all the other professors who have come out, like, oh, Lynch was a genius from the get-go. Yeah, sure. The dean is kind of the hero in this because he put down, like, his resignation to the board of the directors because the directors didn't want Lynch to make this movie at all. And he's like, I'll leave if you let Lynch make this movie. And Lynch said that he felt that he thought that it was probably like he was showing his like trump card, and they're like, okay, we'll take your resignation. And so it kind of backfired on the dean a little bit. But I mean, good on him for sticking up for something he believed in. Exactly. No. So I appreciate that. Yeah, this is where like I do have respect for the dean in regards to this, and maybe not so much the other professors. No, because as we get into it, you will understand why there was a lot of hesitancy. Yes. And so from getting the initial screenplay, it still took a couple years to even start filming and making after that. Yeah. To give a little context, they were supposed to have finished the film by a year or two. Yeah, that and they had just started it. Yeah, and like just started is a very light term. It like really barely began work. And if we want to talk about like DIY scraping the bottom of the barrel, man, this one did it. But at the same time, it feels right knowing the backstory that they were salvaging scraps of discarded film and sound stock from Warner Brothers. Yeah, and they were creating literally all of this themselves. Oh yeah, and they were doing so almost entirely out of Lynch's head. Yeah, which doesn't make the process go faster because you can't like hand a design to someone and say, hey, go make this thing. You kind of have to wait for him to make it. Yeah. Which, I mean, part of the art process, part of the reason why this is an art film and not a movie, because like one of the props, he wouldn't tell anyone how he made it. Oh, yeah. Like, at all. Like, refused to even suggest how he came about it. There are people who are pretty sure how he did it, but without him confirming, they can't. Exactly. And speaking of props, for examples of how they scavenged and pulled from stuff, they borrowed a bunch of props from Warner Brothers without permission, or with the permission of an old-timer, and they kind of did it, like, late at night, kind of, like, sketchy, but, like, when they went to return it 4 years later, no one knew that they even had the props or that the props were even on the record. So it was just like a bunch of random props that they had.
I love how there's like some guy out there who's like, oh yeah, no one's used that thing in decades. You boys can just have it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've seen people do stuff like that. I mean, look at what Philip did with a giant 8x8 piece of log.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's definitely possible. It just cracks me up that in a film school setting, there's just that many bits laying around.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And so, at some point they do mention that, the AFI, which is what I'm going to call the American Film Institute.
Yeah, it's a lot shorter.
Yeah, it's just to keep it simple. They kind of forgot about that they were making a movie because at the time they were using some abandoned stables or what Lynch called stables.
Yeah, like they had found some very out of the way stuff because it was taking them so long. Like you don't want to rent part of the school's area, and like it wouldn't have fit the style he wanted. It wouldn't have had the lighting that he was looking for. Well,
and I think it was more so a thing of convenience because...
Definitely for him.
Lynch just kind of took over the space without anyone's real permission.
And not just like, oh, he's the main person in here, like, living in there level of artsy-fartsy. Like, this isn't just his studio. He's got a bed in the corner.
Yes. But eventually people did remember. And, at some point, the AFI had to. They did take over the stables again for an editing room, but at some point the AFI ended up having to distance themselves from it because there's a bit of backstory behind them having issues with the unions and the AFI competing with them to make feature films.
Sure.
So all student films had to be short films, but as Eraserhead was starting to look more and more like a feature film, they kind of backed out a little bit and said, we'll help you where we can, but it's going to be made in association with.
Yeah.
So that way it was fully Lynch's project, and they kind of had a little bit of a hand in it.
Which, honestly, for Lynch, ended up working really well in his favor, because those of you who've gone through any form of artsy-fartsiness in college know that the college owns all your shit, no matter how good it is.
Yes.
And so, like, it was kind of actually a blessing in disguise that they thought this was going to be a piece of crap. And we're like, yeah, you can keep it.
It's kind of also like the reverse of Disney and their extensive pornographic library.
This is a good example of why, no matter how bad you think the thing is, if you're going to be a bullshit person and own all of everyone's stuff, you got to go all in.
Yeah. For those who don't know, Disney, if you work for them as an artist, Disney owns anything you draw while you're working for them, whether it's for them or if it's in your own free time. So a bunch of disgruntled artists have drawn canonical Disney pornography.
Which, of course, Disney confiscates and goes, the children.
Yes.
And our image.
And there is a vault of it somewhere.
I hope there's a physical vault and not just a thumb drive.
I would love to peruse that, just to be like, you guys are some sick people.
It'd be the equivalent of walking through the penis hall at the Vatican. It would be just a joy.
Yeah, totally. And so, before we really get into the feature, I do think it's important to understand that from the get-go, Eraserhead is a highly interpretable and personal film, not just for Lynch, but also for audiences. Because Lynch actually didn't make this movie with an audience in mind. This was a movie he made for himself. It was a very self-exploration movie.
Oh, definitely.
But it's resonated with so many people, and Lynch intended it to be abstract with no real answers. And one thing about this is that Lynch has he has a meaning behind it. Yes. But he's not sharing it either.
No.
Because it would break the illusion. And on top of that, I think it would kind of ruin it. It's kind of like when Christopher Nolan in Inception said, oh, this is the ending. Or Tarantino said, whatever the golden thing in the box is, whatever you want it to be. It's a MacGuffin. But, like, this movie doesn't really have that.
I also think this movie beats both of those in a way that neither of them really could from the get-go. Eraserhead is so artsy and artistic in both how it was made and how you view it. Yeah. That no matter what Lynch says, it doesn't matter. Yeah. And he knows that. And also, like, because this is a personal piece of art, he knows that no matter what he could say, like, that wouldn't add to the art piece anymore. He's put it out there, it's got its little plaque on the museum wall, and he's happy with that.
Yep. And I think that's perfect. So.
Yeah, I do too.
As well, just before I go into it a little bit, there are parts of this that feel, and I'll mention it at one part, there's stuff that was shot that a lot of the movie feels kind of spliced together.
Ooh, yeah, shit really does.
Because in the commentary, they do talk about a lot of stuff that never made it into the feature. Case in point, Lynch talks about a real dead cat he got from a veterinarian that he decided to dissect and, like, explore it. Which...
I would like to know which veterinarian he convinced to give him a cat.
Well, okay, so there is a bit of story behind that. So... he called the vet, explained what he wanted to do. The vet said, I don't know about that. He got, and then, like, towards the end of the call, the vet's like, hey, hang on a second, I'll call you back. Calls him back like 20 minutes later. He's like, hey, we just euthanized a cat. It just came into the office right as we hung up. It had to be put down. There was no way around it. I question, maybe, but the vet's like, hey, so just as long, I'll give it to you just as long as this never appears in a film.
He gave a dead cat to a man who's going to dissect it, who is a film student.
Lynch has those serial killer vibes for a lot of the stuff he talks about.
He's a very convincing man, I'll give him that.
I
know a handful of vets, and can I have a dead cat is a question they would laugh at and then tell you, no, go find your own.
This is also the 70s.
That's a good point. The 70s were weird.
Husband has sent me decapitated cat pictures, which
that's
I am fascinated with.
They get to keep those cats.
I know, for good reason for that one, too. But that cat is actually technically on set. It's just below the camera because they submerged it and, like, let it petrify and shit.
Oh, good. I'm sure it smelled great.
Like, no, it was petrified, like, encased in, like, oil, so, like, it kind of preserved it.
I hope so.
Yeah. Well, because Lynch mentions, like, he came back to the set a year later and pulled the cat out of the muck, and, like, it was still, like...
Lynch as a student reminds me of a guy who goes, no, nothing in here smells bad, and you're like, no, Lynch, you smell bad.
Yeah. Well, they talk about, like, Lynch, like, would get fixated on, like, one food, and, like, that was all he would eat and stuff, like...
Which, like, I totally understand that, but, like, I've also been there, and that's how you become a stanky raccoon man.
Yeah, you and your disgusting bowl of peas.
I'm sorry. But I'm also not. They're delicious.
No, you're not. Exactly. And then there was one point, I think Lynch talked about, like, a naked mouse that they filmed that they used Nair.
Mouse. I feel like all mice are naked.
No, they use, like, Nair on it to, like, remove the fur. Like,
I see.
A naked mouse.
An extra level of naked. I got you. Okay, I see. Yeah, I'm okay with those scenes not being in here. I've got enough disgusting bits floating around this movie as it is.
Lynch is a madman, and I am honestly fascinaed with him.
Lynch is a madman who falls very dangerously close to the fascination with gushy, squishy things. Mad.
Yes.
That line gets borderline too far a couple times in this movie, but he toes around it because we cut out like 20 minutes of movie.
Oh, yeah. And who knows what else they got rid of.
Yeah.
So, Eraserhead.
Ah, yes. Good luck trying to explain all of this.
I think I have a good explanation of the visuals.
Okay, the visuals are about all we can truly go through.
Yes, I do have a personal behind it, but I'll explain that at the end.
Sure.
So, Eraserhead opens with a man's head bobbing across the screen with a planet behind him while white noise plays in the background.
Yes. I will say this, though. If I had not read the synopsis where everyone kept calling that thing a planet, I would not have called that a planet.
Same.
It looks like a mud ball.
I mean, technically a planet.
I know that's technically what a planet is, but this looks like just a normal, like a 3-year-old came up and was like, I made it for you.
Yes.
It looks mushy.
A bit. And so we cut to shots of the surface and entering the video and onto a house as a scarred person observes the man from before as a ethereal worm leaves the original man's mouth.
Ethereal worm is how you're describing it, huh?
It is a sperm.
It's a flattened sperm.
It is a sperm.
It ran into a window. It got bent a little.
It looks like a sperm got infected by venom, but kept its white appearance.
I will say, with the exception of the main character, who there's a little argument to this as well, Eraserhead has the same visual outtake to people and the environment as like Mad Max does.
Yes.
Everything that we're going to describe, something is lumpy and bumpy and wrong with it.
Mm-hmm.
Everything has dirt in its teeth. Everything has dirt under its fingernails, no matter how clean they're supposed to be.
Yeah, it's very grungy industrial feeling, and
we'll get into that more, because that was part of the like entire thing. But when we say like, oh, a man, with the exception of the main character who has too much hair on just the top of his head, like everyone in this film is going to be lumpy, bumpy, dirty.
Fun fact about our protagonist there.
Mm-hmm.
That was before like that haircut was popular in the punk scene. That's what inspired that hairdo.
It is very punk.
Yeah, because Lynch said at the time when they were filming, and he kept that haircut for like 4 years.
Yeah, it was because they took forever to film this, so this poor guy had to walk around campus with this haircut. Well,
at the time they only had like, you had your normal stereotypical gentleman clean cut look, and then you had the hippies.
Yeah, and I mean punk was a thing, but it was very underground. It wasn't.
It hadn't hit the U.S. yet.
Not in the way that we think about it now, and like being seen or having punk hair or clothing and stuff like that, it did exist, but not nearly like it does now. You would not see anyone at the mall with punk stuff.
No, not at all.
Like there'd be one guy in your whole state who would wear it outside.
This is Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
Oh yeah.
Think that level of aesthetic.
Yeah, so like this poor man is he's got full punk hair that he was a trooper. He didn't even complain that much about having to wear it for like 4 or 5 years.
Not at all. And so as the man pulls a lever, I'll call it a sperm.
Okay. You call whatever you want. You call us white spaghetti for all I care.
Jacked white spaghetti. Yeah. It's got muscles.
Shit, yeah, it's a weird looking sperm.
Just a heads up, there is going to be a lot of sexual innuendo talk in this movie, because they're not even innuendo, symbolism.
It's a lot of very sexy symbolism, and not in the like fun
sexy symbolism,
and not in the fun sexy symbolism either. There's not like an imagination of boobs. It's a lot of like struggle with your own identity and whether or not there should be people on this earth. Sort of sexy things.
Yeah,
it is. There's a lot of crises going on.
Yes, there is. So this sperm drops into a puddle.
Yes, it does.
And we cut to the man from the beginning, looking back at the camera, kind of, and entering a dark tunnel as he wanders a desolate city patch.
Yes, and this is the spot where we really get to start to see the world building of Lynch, and I love the world building that Lynch can do, because it kind of has like, an early almost. Because this is part of Lynch's whole vibe. This kind of resonates as Lynch as a director and writer in total. It has the same grunge punk feel that when you first watched a like Nightmare Before Christmas, that you were like, oh, punk and goth can exist on the big screen. It has that same energy where you're like, oh, it's finally captured that true dystopia that I've been looking for.
Yeah, it's a dirt person I want to be.
It is the dirt person living in the factory setting that I have strived for.
Yeah, and so to give a little bit of my background too, Eraserhead was the only Lynch film and TV show I had seen up until this year.
Okay.
So
I think I started with Dune and then went to Eraserhead.
Yeah, I watched Dune for the first time. I watched Mulholland Drive and I watched Blue Velvet. And good
choices.
That's all. I am still kind of new to the Lynch verse outside of Eraserhead, which I'd seen a couple times before this year.
Sure, it's definitely the most popular one, or at least most known as a Lynch film.
Twin Peaks.
True.
Twin Peaks, I would say, is probably his most well-known piece.
I think it's probably his most viewed piece.
Yeah, because it was the most mainstream he's probably ever got.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and so from this. The man enters an apartment building and enters a extremely slow closing elevator in a sparse apartment.
That elevator door, it is not to code.
No.
Nothing in this film was, though, so, like, whatever.
Fun fact about this little bit. The flooring of the of the lobby is the same one as the Red Room in Twin Peaks, which I haven't seen.
You'll get to it.
Also, the cuts between those scenes, like just him entering the elevator and then him exiting the elevator, that's like years.
Yeah.
Same with him entering the apartment. Like, this movie is cut up hella long, like, weirdly.
But it is impressive, though, because you go in knowing that. And it's kind of part of why it's recommended to look into this movie before you really get going on it. Because knowing that, I am impressed with how, like, continuous this movie feels.
Because that's the thing, is, like, this movie has a pretty, like, continuous story. Like, there is a good... there's continuity to it. Like, that's how we're able to get, like, an actual, like... It's not like the Salvador Dali movies where, like, there's nothing connecting really anything. Like, things are connected in a linear fashion.
Definitely.
Yeah. Also, side little note, the apartment, Lynch lived in that room for 2 or 3 years until the stables were repurposed for the editing room.
Like I said, this man is a living raccoon, and I appreciate him.
Yes. So as he's entering his room, his neighbor informs him that a girl named Mary called, and that Harry is invited to dinner.
Harry. Aha.
That is our protagonist's name, is Harry.
It is, which is fitting because he has a lot of hair.
Yeah. No, it's not Harry.
It's Henry, isn't it?
It's Henry. I specifically wrote this down. It is Henry. I keep calling him Harry because Mary and Harry rhyme.
That would have been too cute, but no.
No. One thing I do like about this apartment is that there's this ever-present sound of machinery, like, just from the radiator hissing to the pounding of distant machinery.
Yes.
And, like, there are, like...
It vibes with that cheap apartment you had right out of college where it makes noise all the time.
Yes.
Like, you can hear everyone outside talking, and you know they can hear you, too.
My apartment kind of right now with my upstairs neighbors stomping around like a goddamn lost great ape of the U.S. This is actually how I refer to them constantly.
They're very loud.
Yes. Also, one thing I've mentioned, Lynch, specifically from Lynch on Lynch, he was fascinated by room tone and the silence between dialogue. Which
he explored a lot in this film. And it works really nicely because part of the appeal of this film is the sound design and the music design.
Yes.
Mostly because we don't have a whole lot of dialogue. But it works to build a tension without having like that weird orchestra, anxiety, bosses coming sort of music. Because that constant hum in the background, even if you've never lived in a place like that, it puts you on edge. You're like, this is obnoxious. This is annoying.
And I think that's important because it feels like it's kind of a case study on set design and the atmosphere around that. Because I feel like it's kind of overlooked a little bit because like people have this great vision of, oh, this is going to be the facilitator, where most of this movie, the set is kind of like the big feature and stuff that's kind of happening around it.
Well, and the noises that they chose to make and to use are so rudimentary and like so puzzle pieced together from lots and lots of different places. They made their own noises. They found some noises. They found some old recordings that they like warped and used. And because this is an amalgamation, none of it is clean. Yeah. None of it sounds crisp. It's hard to understand what that noise over there was. I don't know what that thing was. But it does so without being purposefully muffled, which you see a lot in, like, especially modern action movies. Yeah. Which is why that weird dungy apartment that the action hero is hiding out in doesn't feel like a real dungy apartment. Yeah. It also kind of makes me think of those moments when, like, you go on either a scope trip or, like, you're looking at a building and there's just, like, that moment of silence, like, where there's not anyone really talking, maybe in the super distance, but, like, it's just that weird, awkward silence that most people are super uncomfortable in. A hotel at 11 o'clock in the afternoon. Yes. Yeah. Nice and quiet. But creepily quiet. Yeah, it's not supposed to be. Haunting. Yes. Yes. It works because it resonates this whole film. Yes. It is the undercurrent of this movie. Yes. And there's one thing in this apartment that I think is kind of important to, like, for my overall interpretation of it. Okay. On his nightstand, there is a branch chilling on a pile of dirt.
just sticking up like he's trying to grow it.
Okay, all right.
There's something to that.
There is.
They're like I said, this movie is very personal and like.
Yeah, no matter how you watch it, you're gonna see something that resonates to you.
Yes. And so from here, we cut to a woman who is anxiously looking out the window as Henry arrives through an ominous city.
You can feel the grit in the air sort of city.
Yes. And we learned that Mary and Henry have kind of been apart for a little bit, that she doesn't come around anymore. And this is our first bit of dialogue.
And it's slow dialogue.
Yeah, it's like
deliberate, and it feels like the characters are having to think up their own lines. Yeah,
we're like 13 minutes into the movie. We're a decent chunk into this movie. This movie's only an hour and a half, and we're just having our first bit of dialogue.
And this movie...
Our second bit, because there's the part where he talks to his neighbor.
Yeah.
Or listens to his neighbor.
And, like, despite this movie, on paper sounding like it's a decent length movie, it's not a short. This is full length, for sure. This movie's pacing, despite being slow, is constant. Yeah. There is no, like, I don't know. It has pauses, but the pauses don't feel like pauses.
Because so much of the movie is a quote-unquote pause. Like,
exactly.
It's all about the ambience of what's going on.
And so, like, the speaking parts almost become the pause. Like, it feels reversed. And so when they start speaking, especially when the father figure starts talking in this scene, he talks the most, I think, out of everyone in this film. Yeah. And even his dialogue, I don't remember most of it, and I just watched this film, because he's rambling. He's talking about how, I don't know, his arms hurt. I can't feel nothing.
Got a little bit about that. So, okay. We do meet the parents, but again, there's an awkward pause where there's these pups suckling in the background.
It's awkward as hell.
Of which, Jean Bates, the mother who plays Mrs. X, Lynch thought she was too beautiful for the role, and so he had to ugly her up.
Which, I mean, I can understand, because this whole film is, again, full of dirty, grimy, lumpy people. And yeah, I think a normal-looking housewife sort of character would have not lived in a dirty industrial Philadelphia. No. And so we learned that Henry is a printer, and Mary may not be all there, as she kind of starts to spaz out until her mother starts brushing her hair. Yeah, but it's kind of weird, because you kind of get the vibe that nobody in this movie is all together. No. Because Henry spends most of this interaction and dialogue is like people being like, hello, and it takes him a minute to be like, hello. Yeah. The correct human response is to say hello.
Yeah, it's like a robot trying to observe the world. Like, figure out the best response. Kind of like, he's almost alien within this own world.
He definitely feels alien with this own world. And it's almost to the point where, like, he's never seen this person before. He barely recognizes Mary. The mother figure, like, she feels kind of genuine, but at the same time she's totally in her own bubble. Yeah. She does not recognize Henry's uncomfortableness. She barely recognizes that her daughter's having trouble. Yep. She doesn't notice anything around her. Yeah. Like,
well, because even then, like, you mentioned the father's weird, because he goes on ranting about how he plumbed half the city.
Which would be 1.5 feet.
But if you look at their house, there's piping everywhere. It makes me think of like the HVAC or the college professors who are like, oh yeah, I love HVAC units. Why do people think they're ugly?
And it's like, because they are ugly.
They're a giant carton of metal.
There's a reason there's only one building that put it on the outside, and people still laugh at it.
Yeah. But he kind of reminds me of like that character in Cowboy Bebop.
Oh yeah,
who is claiming he built the space gates with his friends while his friends are there with him.
And the friends are like, "No, we didn't, you dumbass." Yes. Yeah, and while he's rambling and going on and on and on, the mother figure, it takes her forever to be like, "Oh, my husband's talking nonsense out of his ass, honey, shush." Yeah, like, it's okay, dear.
Well. And so the other thing I like about this set and the scenery, this scene too, is because it heavily emphasizes the the adoption of machinery into the house, where piping is everywhere. Like, it is a focal point of the house. It's supposed to feel like a suburban kind of house, too.
It almost gives the feel of, like, an unfinished home. Like, we put the drywall up first sort of house. Yeah. Which, for this film, adds to that ass-backwardness that is part of the, like, uncomfortableness of this whole film. Yep. Because if it had been a nice, clean room, yeah, you would have been uncomfortable, but I don't think uncomfortable would have been the right word. You would have been uneasy. Yeah. Whereas this film just kind of leaves you feeling like you walk through wet sand.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. The grit.
Yeah, this one feels that correct grimy and dirtiness when we talk about punk or grunge.
Yes. Yeah, no, exactly. And now we cut to an even odder scene where the mother is using her mother to mix the salad and prep dinner while the father is the meat man and he makes the chicken.
That is the phrasing. That is the correct phrasing. Makes the chicken. Yeah. There is no explanation. It's one of those weird, like, oh, okay. Like, this is starting to test your waters to see if you're ready to accept the bullshittiness of the artisticness that is this, like, visuals. Like, are you ready to accept that this is how we are going to handle the story?
Yes and no, because we also kind of get, like, actually, yes, you are right in the fact that this is really the first weird artsy moments in this, because the father mentions that he's proud of these chickens because they're man-made chickens. They're the first of their kind. So it's kind of implying that, like, everything is manufactured.
Yeah, like there is no such thing as green anymore. Yes.
And it also kind of starts hinting at the start of an overall theme, because he asks Henry to carve the chicken, which is kind of like a passing of the torch. Yeah. Like, as father gives, it's your first Thanksgiving to cut the turkey.
Yeah, and like you can see the symbolism, but it all feels off.
Yes. And at this time, the father starts rambling about the old times and relentlessly reflecting on the world that has changed, but he's remembering how it was when it was still in progress.
Yes, and I mean, it kind of solidifies the fatherliness of him, because, like, what father doesn't do this?
Yes. Oh, yes, exactly.
In my day, walked uphill both ways.
Yes. And before Henry can cut into the chicken, something begins oozing out.
Yeah, and, like, ooze... We'll have to use the word ooze a couple times in this film. There's a lot of oozing going on. Yes. There's different types of oozes, which I appreciate. I'm glad we didn't stick to one nasty feature. There is, like, oatmeal ooze later on in the film.
This is like
can of cream of chicken ooze.
I was thinking more pimple popper, where it's like the big giant abscess.
It's very, very cysty. Yeah. Not the crispy, crunchy one, the leaky one.
But it's also poop covered, as far as we can tell in black and white.
It does look a little feces-esque.
The chicken comes with its own gravy.
It sure do. And, like, it's disgusting. This is the, like, first part of this film where you as the audience are going, oh hell fucking no, and none of the characters are reacting. And that plays a lot in this film, because this film plays a lot with contrasts, right? Yeah. And so this is a contrast of your feeling to the goose and the ooze versus the character's non-response to the ooze.
And I don't know, maybe I just saw this a little differently, because, like, I remember when I saw it, I'm like, huh, cool.
And see, like, from a film watching standpoint, like, that's what we're conditioned to be like, okay, we knew this was artsy when we were making chickens, but it's still attempting to play off of you knowing that that's not what a chicken do. Yeah. And, like, apparently these people do not know what chicken do. This might be the only chicken they've ever seen.
Yeah, you're not wrong. Because they're talking about, like, it's a big deal, too.
Yeah, like, this is the first chicken in 20 years anybody's ever looked at.
Yeah, because amidst the chaos, too, the mother starts freaking out like the daughter did earlier. And then Mary leaves the room screaming and crying.
Away she goes.
Yep. And Henry is called away by the mother, who is promptly told that there is a quote-unquote baby. They're not sure it's human or not, but it is alive.
Which, they say that quickly. Like, we're not sure if it's human or not, but it is alive, and it is your baby.
Yeah.
And, like...
Or, not even is it your baby, it's like, did you have sexual relations with Mary?
You will get pregnant and die.
Yeah, it's very much that kind of vibe.
But, like, the dialogue feels so out there that it kind of brings back that weird, like, high school mentality of, like, you will get pregnant and die.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of, like, unrational fear.
Yeah.
That, granted, like, is there rational fears to having children? Of course. But this film is playing off of a lot of the, like, wow, the chicken just oozed pus.
Yeah.
Sort of level of fear.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, none of this is supposed to make sense, and, like, now the baby doesn't make sense. Whose baby is this? Where did it come from?
Well, we haven't even seen the baby yet.
We don't even know what the baby looks like, and it's maybe human?
Maybe.
Maybe?
The chicken's maybe chicken.
The chicken is also maybe chicken. I have a lot of questions.
But also in the scene, because Henry and Mary do make up,
Mm-hmm.
but I do like how the pipes frame that scene specifically.
Yes.
Because it is very much, it makes Mary feel like she's in her own bubble, kind of in like a sheltered world, because like the normal household wallpapers behind her,
Mm-hmm.
but where Harry's standing is like a very industrial.
Yeah, it does feel like she's got a comfort level to her.
Yeah,
that
like
he's missing.
She hasn't left the bubble, and he's the outside world. It's very much that Billy Joel Uptown Girl song.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
It's very... Actually, I think I know why I was drawn to this movie from the get-go is, like, the cover reminded me of, like, Billy Joel's Best Of album cover.
Oh, yeah, I can see it a little
like,
bit.
just that kind of, like, oh, yeah, I know why that seemed familiar to me back then.
Mm-hmm.
But anywho, from this, we return to Henry's apartment, where Mary is trying to feed the baby as
Mm-hmm.
Henry returns home and just kind of ignores them and lays on the bed.
Yeah, again, it's like Henry is letting life happen to him.
Yes.
And not in the normal movie sense, we're like, oh, so distant. Why wouldn't he react to his girlfriend? No, like, Henry doesn't realize that there's people in his house, I don't think. Or if he does, he's hoping that they're ghosts and that they will disappear.
It's like how I acknowledge my cats are there and then walk around them.
Yes.
But on the opposite, I walk around them to try and ambush them.
Yes. Henry's not ambushing nobody.
No.
This would be the equivalent if a small mountain lion was in your house, but you had to let it live here. Maybe don't make eye contact, we're gonna walk around it.
It reminds me of, like, those people who have, like, the serval cats.
Oh, yeah.
And, like, they feed them, like, chicken legs and shit.
Like,
and,
just, here's raw meat.
Yeah.
You are wild.
And the thing crawls out like Gollum out of the closet, like, pulls a whole
chicken leg
back.
under the couch.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Henry's living with that.
Yeah, kind of. And so, at night in the apartment, the baby cries and the wind howls as the radiator hisses.
It's a noisy night.
Mm-hmm. And all of it is too much for Mary, who leaves for a decent night's sleep at home, showing that Mary has left her bubble and is not very comfortable being in Henry's world.
Yeah, she doesn't like it.
Which, Henry's room is kind of like that weird little bit of solitude.
Yeah, and I also feel like Henry's room is almost like in a representation of Henry himself. Like,
yeah.
He is not comfortable with himself, and nobody is comfortable with him either. They're trying. She did come over. She tried to feed the baby, but she don't like it in here. It's
kind of like Henry's, like, last bastion of solitude.
Yeah.
Like, or just his last comfort space from a world that's industrial. Because Lynch mentions that, like, every single window is looking out at brick or machinery or something. Yeah,
there's no good view.
No.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like, this
place is a shithole.
It's a shithole apartment that at least has a room, because I got a little drunk when Sugi was playing Doki Doki Literature Club, and I was bitching on his stream that the protagonist's room, I could not see a window in his bedroom. Because by code, you have to have a window, and at least he has a window.
You do need that fresh air. Don't want to die.
I don't see a bathroom, though, so I don't know if it's old-timey communal bathroom apartments.
I mean...
We don't know...
It might be.
I mean, yeah, that's the thing is we don't know if this movie's set during like the Industrial Revolution. It's probably set more like in the 20s or 30s from like the wallpaper and stuff. But
even then, though that style of bathroom, if you go down the bucket list low enough in the price range, you can still find those those apartments for sale where there is no bathroom. It's down the street.
It feels like, do you remember the movie Jumper?
Uh-huh.
When he goes to rent that room?
Yep. And it's literally a room.
Yeah.
Yeah. That feels very much like this.
And so, that night, the baby stops crying because they are sick in a fraction of a second. They look normal. Henry turns back, and he's covered in pox. That kind of remind me of, do you know that surrealist painting where it's the woman crying, but it's like the beads?
Yeah.
Yeah, it feels like that, but imagine chicken pox.
Yeah, and also we should mention that the baby is not a baby.
Yeah.
It is a fleshy sperm.
Oh yeah, we forgot to talk about the baby because we do see the baby earlier.
Yeah, we do get to look at the baby, and when they say we don't think it's human, that's an accurate statement. This thing looks like a drumstick that has been filleted. It
makes me think of that evolutionary theory.
Yeah.
Because where like fetuses kind of all look the same for a certain amount of time.
Yeah, you got a head, you got some limbs.
It makes me think of like the primordial evolution
It does feel very primordial.
Yeah.
Without limbs. It's just got like too much neck like E.T. It looks like E.T. Swaddle E.T., cover him in blood, it looks like E.T.
I have a politically incorrect idea. E.T.'s special needs cousin.
Yeah. A little. Maybe if E.T. was an infant, this is what infant E.T. might look like.
We'll go with infant E.T. instead of my
incorrect statement.
I'm not. Yeah.
I mean, we also are starting to get a sense that baby was gross to begin with, but it acted kind of like a baby. Like it cried.
Yeah.
In the most artsy sense of baby. It cried, it was annoying, and he doesn't like it, so it's ugly. But now it's, very suddenly sick.
Well, and on top of that, Henry just kind of leaves it, as
he doesn't do anything with this baby.
He checks his temperature and is like, oh, you're sick. And then he just goes back to fucking bed.
Yeah, he has no investment in this blob creature.
Yeah, and as he returns to bed, he dreams about a woman dancing in a radiator who...
Oh, the radiator woman.
Who has sperm falling from the ceiling as she proceeds to stomp on it.
Yes, and she has very extra... she has 2 cheeks on top of her cheeks.
She is what I would imagine a human chipmunk would look like.
She's got a lot of skin problems going on.
A human chipmunk that fusion hawed with the moon.
Yeah, just very lumpy.
Yes.
But it's kind of weird because we see her, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we know without having to be told that she is supposed to be the desired one. And I don't really know how to explain it because you see her and you go, you're weird, you're creepy, but you're the dream woman.
She is a perversion of Marilyn Monroe.
Oh, yeah.
It's that iconography that...
She's got the done-up hair, she's got her lips all done, she's got her makeup on, she's got a cute outfit on. She's cute, minus the extra cheeks.
It's the start of the underlying, idea of infidelity brewing within Henry.
Yes.
Because, she, like you said, or like I said, she is kind of like a perverted, or a perversion of Monroe.
Yeah.
But on top of that, she's stomping on what we assume is his sperm. This is a wet dream for him.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a confusing dream, but it's there.
Yeah. Side little thing of note, the woman in the radiator was actually not part of the original script and was kind of done on the fly because the radiator they used was an odd old model that actually had a door compartment for it.
Ooh.
Lynch didn't know what it was even used for, but he just had this idea that what if someone lived in there?
I like his thought process. I would not have ended at the same place that he did.
I don't know where I would have gone with that.
It would not have been extra cheek lady.
No, not at all. But it is also a good point to note out for this, and for pretty much the whole movie, is that Lynch loves what he calls organic phenomenon.
Yeah.
Which is very much like the surrealist idea of, I can't remember I love the idea of it, but I can never remember the term because it's an early surrealist concept before like surrealism was actually fully developed. And it's the kind of like found exploration of like walking around a corner and stumbling upon a building you weren't expecting kind of feel.
Yeah. The surprise of an unexpected but ordinary thing.
Yes. And I apologize if you can hear licking real quick. Charlie is being an ass lately.
But he's so cute.
Yes. But the woman in the radiator is a prime example of that phenomenon, of just that organic discovery.
Yes. Because she is simultaneously desirable and gross and also like such a dream character inside this weird dream world.
Yes, because like, I mean, it makes me think of like, I started drawing it yesterday because I have some weird dreams too, but I had a dream of fingers that had like tentacles coming off the back of them, like they were an organic...
backwards tentacle hands. Extra limbs.
But it's just a finger with tentacles behind it.
Oh. I mean, maybe it's good at typing.
I don't know. It's weird. It's that weird thing that like just comes into your head and just like it sticks there and it possesses you.
The brain worm.
Yes.
Yeah. The lady in the radiator feels like a brain worm as well.
Yes, exactly. And so we return to bed where Mary has returned, but she begins to wake Henry, who finds her like releasing something. Like she has some discharge coming from her.
I mean, you do you, girl.
Yeah.
In this world, it could be a lot of things, because it's very clear we're supposed to be seeing this from Henry's point of view. And I don't know how much Henry truly knows about the full woman anatomy or babies, because his head has produced a weird E.T. baby.
I just had a horrible idea that I'm going to ruin you. I'm going to ruin you, listeners. Cream pie.
Again,
it's a discharge.
It's a discharge. But at the same time, like we don't know. Like part of the grossness of this movie is the delight in you getting to make up what you feel is the gross answer. Yeah. So like whatever you felt was the wrong answer, that's what your brain's gonna go with here. Yep. So like, you know, fill in your blank. It's whatever you'd like.
I don't know. I've seen enough horror films where it could be many different things. It could be a lot of things.
Yeah. Yeah. And the sky's the limit in this film, so...
I'm thinking the cabin fever, kind of.
Yeah. I mean, there's that one lady who kills people with vagina bubbles, so...
Oh, that's a ninja. That's a stupid-ass...
Again, sky's
pink ninja movie that...
Sky is the limit.
Yes. We will have to do one of those stupid-ass ninja movies someday. If I can ever get a hold of them, because they are getting harder and harder to find.
Because of the memes.
Well, not even that. They're just, like, not...
No one's making more of them.
Well, they're not making them, but they're also not, like, re-releasing them. Like, I'm pissed off that I can't get the guinea pig movies.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean...
Or the All Night Long series.
Put it on that top aspiration shelf.
If I have enough money... Someday, I'll just re-release these.
There you go.
Yes. And so, from this, because there's this weird part, because Henry hears a knocking at the door, and it's his neighbor who has locked herself out and asks to spend the night.
In, like, the weirdest way she can.
But we just came from him in bed with Mary.
Yeah, but Henry's demeanor and... lack of participation in his own life kind of gives the sense that like he doesn't care. Yeah. Like, yeah, Mary was just here, but like, it's not even like oh fuck Mary. It's like a Mary who? Oh yeah, I guess she was here. Like, yeah, I guess I know Mary.
Well, so and it's kind of this weird thing because we do know from the get-go that Henry does have feelings for Mary.
Yeah, I mean, at least Henry tells himself he has feelings for Mary.
Yes. But kind of... this kind of leans to the fact that he feels kind of trapped. Yeah. Because as she proceeds to enter the house or enter the apartment, they start getting hot and bothered. They go to the bed and that turns into like a
Soup?
Shrek style sauna.
Yeah, they become human stew. It's I mean, hot tub time, I guess.
The real passion, how they describe in movies where I don't know where my body ended and hers began.
Yeah, it does feel like a true visualization of like a bad smut book.
Yes.
Where it's like, oh, the bed became hot and we became one pool in each other's eyes. And it's like, that nasty. Y'all nasty.
Oh. It makes me think of like, because I was talking to you about it before, like I finally watched Caligula.
Yeah.
And it makes me think of like a Penthouse. Like, or Cosmo. It feels more like a R-rated Cosmo kind of
it does.
Magazine.
One of these days, I will introduce you to the bad smut writing that exists out there in the world, because this feels like a visual interpretation of that. Oh,
I'm aware. I have seen like women on like Twitter and stuff talk about like who the fuck thought this was a good who thought this was romance?
Who this person has never seen or interacted with a woman in their life.
Or it's the very Hemingway ideology of masculinity and like Thor the Conqueror kind of masculinity and romance.
They're so bad they're fun to read.
Yes.
This feels like a visual interpretation of that, which for a surrealist film, I guess works.
Yeah.
Like, in the moment that you're watching it, you're like, soupy.
Yes.
But, like, when you retrospectively think about it, which you're supposed to do with this film, yeah, fine, okay, I get your point. I kind of understand what's going on here, I guess.
It's a weird visual for what it's a very surreal visual for what
it feels like a painting in motion.
It makes me think of a less grotesque Silent Hill monster, oh god, what the one I'm thinking of, there's actually a handful of these where like the Silent Hill creatures like kind of like
they're blobby.
They blob together. The one I'm thinking about it's called the Good Daddy, and it's this mass in like a blanket over a bed. It's very rape. Yeah, they're all
squishy, but yeah, I know which one you mean.
Yeah, it's disgusting.
Yeah,
Drawfee did one on it.
Of course. Oh, poor Drawfee. They're forced to draw so much that they don't realize until afterwards.
I can't remember if Karina or Julia did that one.
Either way, I'm sure it was glorious.
It was great. And so, from this, this movie goes by real fucking quick after this.
It really does. It like you blink and you've missed something.
Because we transition to the Radiator Girl singing "In Heaven,"
which he liked this song so much that he plops it kind of into his other movies.
Yeah.
Like either as just like the sound part, or even the lyrics get put in other spots. Like, this part of the art resonated with him. Yeah,
Lynch is very self-referential because the stick and the dirt on the nightstand there's another movie short he did that I can't remember the actual name of because I watched them like back to back to back.
Sure.
And it was it had the weirdest birth scene I've seen in a movie, probably.
If anyone was going to do a weird birth scene, it'd be Lynch.
Yes.
Let's be real.
Yeah. But he's very self-referential in everything after this.
And I kind of appreciate that because, again, he's coming at this more from a like painter's point of view than like a filmmaker's point of view at this point. And so I kind of like that he's got these ideas, these nuggets that came out of this piece of art that he went, okay, I feel like this piece could be over here and like this theme fits over here.
You know what it makes me think of? It makes me think of Satoshi Kon and Paranoia Agent, where he just took plot lines that he couldn't actually make into a full feature and just sprinkled them into a series.
Yeah, this has that same vibe without feeling like he's flushed anything more out. Yeah. It's almost like a signature color that he's really into at the moment.
Yeah.
Or like he's really into putting like a piece of tape in the bottom left corner of the canvas. Why? He doesn't know, but he likes it.
But it's a weird thing because like we talk about that, but it feels like it is right. Complete. Yeah.
It feels correct.
It's
just not contemporary.
Yeah, exactly. And so Henry and the Radiator Girl stare each other down
Mm-hmm.
as she is replaced with the scarred dude from the beginning.
I guess.
And the tree in the background, and a tree enters, and Henry's head pops up and is replaced with the babies.
Yeah, and it's definitely replaced with the babies, but because of how it's shot and angled, the baby no longer looks spermy. It looks penisy.
A bit.
I know it's the same prop, but because of how they've repositioned it, and now you're not recognizing it as like, oh, that's things called the baby. It makes it kind of its own bit. Like,
I still see it as more of like a fetus, where
definitely, it definitely still feels different, but it no longer feels like, oh, we've taken the baby's head and put it on him. It feels like almost like, oh, the baby came from him. Okay.
Yeah.
It feels like he was the original all along.
Yeah, exactly. It feels kind of like a return to origin, like the son replacing the father kind of thing.
Exactly.
Or the fears of the son replacing the father kind of thing. Because remember, this is a horror flick.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, and so after this, the tree begins to bleed.
Because of course it does.
And Henry's head falls through the pool from the beginning and into the streets.
I like the head part.
Yeah.
The head, because it doesn't, like, it falls quite a ways and it splats real nicely on the ground.
Yeah.
And, you get to see the head. Which normally, like, it's a hit or miss with me and, like, the showing of body parts after they've detached from the body in horror films. Some of them, you feel like, oh, yeah, okay, that was the cut I needed. That's that extra little bit of gore that I was looking for.
Yeah.
And then sometimes you're like, oh, look, you painted a styrofoam leg. This one toes the line really nicely because you can tell that that's a paper mache head. Yeah. Like, you can tell that this was an arts and craft, but it's a nice arts and craft.
Yeah, it's finely detailed.
It is finely detailed, but it's not so far over the top and overdone that at any point do you feel like that Lynch is trying to tell you this is a real head. Yeah. It's very clear that this is like, oh, maybe his head was fake all along. Yeah. Sort of, like, it lends into this fantasy world even better than if it had been realistic.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. That's actually a good point. Because, like, I didn't really think about that too heavily. I was more focused on the other weird bits, because
there's a lot of other weird bits.
For me, this is my least favorite segment.
See, for me, this is my favorite segment. Okay. Because there's less visually going on for me.
Oh, okay.
Because for me, especially with modern art and like surrealist art, I like the ones where it's like all one color or like one pinpoint in the middle of it. Like, I like that level of like, we've focused in on the most minute. Okay. And so for me, this feels like the most zoomed in for Lynch.
Okay, yeah, it's the opposite of me where like I like the sensory overload.
Yeah. I think I like this scene the best because we went from sensory overload to like focusing on this one point. Yeah. And it's almost like he's turned up the magnifying glass on his own film. And he doesn't do this a lot in his other works. Okay. For the most part, unless the film itself is a little bit more on the minimalist side, there's a lot always visually happening. Yeah. And that's part of him and his style, but I liked this little experiment that he had. Okay. He doesn't do it a whole lot, but I like it.
No, I do get that, because it is probably the most dreamlike without being dreamlike, you know?
Yeah, like, we no longer care about the background. Like, the city has kind of blurred away. We get to see an old man laying down on something. Don't really know what.
Yeah, because a street urchin grabs the head.
And just kind of toodles off.
Yeah, brings it to an operator who, like, runs some tests and tell him it's all okay.
And, like, there's this little tiny bit of humor thrown in right here, too, where the street urchin with the head walks into this room and the guy's pushing the buzzer for his boss to come out. And his boss comes out and almost strangles him because, like, why are you ringing the bell? Oh, there's a head. Yeah. Oh, okay. Like, this doesn't feel like the rest of the film. And I like this experiment.
It feels like those normative parts in Clue. Yeah. Where, like, we've had all this confusion and weird shit, and we just have, like, this one weird little moment of clarity where it's like, it's kind of like his subconscious just telling him that, you know what, these feelings you're having, it's okay. Exactly. You're supposed to feel this nervous and weird.
It definitely feels like he stopped thinking as hard. And I like this contrast a lot.
Yep. And so Henry wakes up and sees two people fighting as he hears footsteps in the hallway. Fun little bit.
Mm-hmm.
The people fighting was actually leftovers of a scene that was cut.
Oh, okay. I mean, sure.
It's a couple people fighting over dimes.
Of course it is.
Yeah. I mean, it's a weird transition just to like show like other human interaction outside of him, because up until this point it's all been self-reflective and it's all been centered around Henry, and now he's kind of like observing the world outside because he opens the door and the neighbor is bringing home another man.
Yes. And they're trying to get into her place now.
Yeah, and it's not, well, and that's the thing is like, there's that weird like look between them of like, why the fuck are you looking at me? It was always a one-sided kind of like, what if?
Definitely.
Yeah. And so, from this, Henry goes to his dresser and grabs a pair of scissors from the drawer and decides to, open the swaddling only to discover that it's part of the baby and it was holding it together.
Yeah, he's
holding the guts together.
He's killed the baby, but this scene is very smartly done because it is a struggle to cut through the cloth. Like, these scissors are too weak to get through the bandages.
Yeah.
But he doesn't stop. But it's also not like a rushed fury. This is a deliberate, like, gonna cut this thing.
Yep.
Like, he has thought that this is one of the few actions that Henry has thought through.
Yeah, it makes me think of that line in the Slipknot song, you cannot kill what you did not create. I've wished for this, like Bishop's bat.
Yeah.
Yeah, that bit. God, what is... I can't remember the song, but...
Nope.
But what you mentioned earlier in the episode is that this is the special effect that Lynch has kept a secret.
Yeah, this baby and all... Like, it moves a lot. Its mouth moves, its eyes move, its head moves, its organs move.
So, there are some theories that I agree with.
Okay.
That I'm pretty sure are accurate. And it stems back from Lynch dissecting the cat. Some people are pretty sure it's a homunculus of, like, different or different pieces of animals and stuff. Some people think it's a calf's head.
Maybe
calf, sheep head.
It does look a little bit.
Other people think it's a relatively larger rabbit.
Okay. All right.
Heavily modified.
It would have to be very modified.
Yeah.
As a rabbit owner, and someone who has unfortunately had to bathe said rabbit, which he does not like, and you really shouldn't do, but it was an emergency.
He gets lumpy butt.
He does, unfortunately, not clean his own butt very well. I can see all of those pieces coming together for, like, I can see the logic behind all of those, but to me, none of those go, that one.
Yeah.
Because calf head, maybe? It's a little... little bit the wrong shape and size. Like, he has
it's
whatever...
early fetus level.
Very much so. Whatever he has taken, though, he has modified beyond anyone figuring it out. Which I think works the best.
Oh, yeah.
Because if it had been, like... Even if he had only moderately modified it, then it... Like, the internet is a weird place, and people would have guessed it. And, like, it would have been like, oh, yeah, here's photos, here's someone... figuring it all out.
Yeah.
And the fact that no one, A, has bothered too hard. Like, people have guessed, but no one's given it, like, their entire life's work.
No one's tried to do their own self-taxidermy.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm sure someone has. I'm sure someone has.
I'm sure someone has, but the success must not have been that good, because there's... I mean, there would have been more evidence, I feel. Even if it, hadn't gone great, or, like, they just got close. The fact that, like... You can guess that this is probably a bit from a farmyard somewhere, or he has somehow gotten this via some questionable vets, apparently.
He pulled a Full Metal Alchemist Edward moment. Yes.
And I also like that he, depending on when and who asked him about it, he would flip-flop between he made it versus he found it. And the reason why I like this is because I don't feel like it was him trying to, like, play people. I feel like this was him legitimately answering to a degree. Yeah,
because I'm sure it's something he came across, but...
I think it also
came... Or it's a portion of something.
Yeah, and I also get the sense that maybe this, like, it came to him as much as he made it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, he might have found something to start with, but he didn't know where it was going to end.
Yeah.
And maybe he doesn't ever know, and that's fine.
Yeah, no, exactly. And so, Henry proceeds to stab the organs, killing the baby, whose insides to begin to expand and transform into a larger version of his head.
Yeah.
But, because that's the other thing, too, is it had to be replicatable, because...
Because he does destroy it.
Yeah, he destroys it, but then he enlarges it. So
There's at least a few of these.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I assume they're all gone.
Yep. And so the planet from the opening monologue opens, and the scarred man applies the brakes again, and the screen turns white as the radiator girl runs and embraces Henry.
Because now we've done it? Question mark?
Yeah, it's...
Again, this has the surrealist level that Inception never could have.
No.
Because Inception, no matter how you cut it, has an answer because it's only got the one question: is this a dream? This has more questions than is this a dream? I don't care if this is a dream or not. I need to know what's going on.
Well, I'm pretty sure it's a dream because
I think parts of it are a dream.
Yeah, or it's either parts or all of it. But that's the thing, is Lynch went into this, I don't think, with an answer.
No.
He had a rough concept, whereas Nolan had an answer before he went into it.
Exactly.
And tried becoming scientific and explaining it.
Yeah, and I think the other reason why this works as, like, one of the best surrealist movies, or at least one of the better known surrealist style movies, is because, A, it doesn't have an answer, it never did, it's asking too many questions, but also, like, this is clearly not meant to be solved.
Yeah.
Like, even if you hadn't known the background of, like, oh, this was a student film, he's making this way, and all that sort of stuff, even if you didn't know that, it's very obvious that whoever is either the target audience or whoever made this is trying to explore something themselves.
Yeah.
And that thing is not quantifiable, and it's not something they can depict in words.
Yeah, it almost makes me think of, like, how... I'm going to refer back to this because I still finished it relatively recently. How, like, people explore, like, magic. They're trying to find something in themselves. They're trying to find a way to express themselves, whether it be through some higher being or through something they're creating.
Exactly. And I think there is a little bit, if you really want to know more concrete, knowing a little bit about Lynch's personal life right before and while he was making this could help if that's what you want to do. But you don't have to. You don't necessarily need to know about the things that were happening in his personal life. Yeah,
no, not at all. And I mean, I as someone who went into this not knowing anything the first time I saw it, only knowing it by name and that it was one of the weirdest films ever made, I think I personally would still go back into it, watching it without knowing anything, but rewatching, it's a good way to get a little bit more insight / not really at the same time.
I think the second time you watch it, going in knowing about the college portion, and then going in knowing that he was having trouble with his marriage. His first marriage ended kind of at the beginning of this. He'd had a daughter who had some birth defects that affected him really strongly.
Okay.
I think she was born with club feet that required surgery. And there's conflicting reports from both him and from others on whether or not if he was ready for his daughter, or his children. Yeah. And so, like, all of that definitely does play into this, but it doesn't answer any of this. No. If anything, it just kind of solidifies in your head, like, okay, I thought that's what this was about, but, like, I wasn't sure. Yeah. That's all it really does. Yeah, and I'll get into my thoughts on it in a second, because I do have changing ideals on it. Sure. So, legacy of Eraserhead. Yeah. Originally, it was rejected by the New York Film Festival. Yeah, they weren't crazy about it. Nope. And after cutting a handful of scenes, because Lynch mentioned, like, watching it, he felt like it was going way too slow. Because I think he said, like, the original cut was, like, maybe 10 minutes longer or something. Yeah, but, like, it clearly wasn't hitting the way he wanted it to. And so, after that, he tried to get it into the Cannes Film Festival, and that was their goal.
but he dropped it off to be reviewed, and after it being screened, he learned that the judges had left the day before, and so didn't make it into Cannes because it was screened to a no one. It was screened to no one.
Oops.
And so Lynch kind of took a final chance and said, fuck it. I think it was actually his wife, because I think they divorced like shortly after, or like in the making of it.
Yeah, he remarried, I think during the film, or like right after he remarried to, oh shoot.
I don't know. I don't
remember. But he remarried to the sister of someone else, sort of thing. Where like this man runs in a small circle. Yeah,
and so he submitted to one of the LA film festivals where it premiered in 1977. Because I did write that date right. I don't know why I put 2000s.
Is the DVD from 2007?
I know why. Because I have 2 copies of this. One, I do highly recommend the Criterion version, where we got like all of our information from this on.
The only complaint I have about the Criterion version is that it's a little difficult to turn on the subcaptions. Just a little bit, because it's not on the main menu like you think it's going to be.
If you know your PlayStation. Well, did you watch on your PlayStation?
I have to, because my DVD player won't play it.
Oh, right.
I don't remember what button to what, and you can't put the controller down.
I'll tell you which one it is, because I do it every time. But... yeah, I wrote 2007 because the 2007 was the other collection, the other one that I have that has all his interviews again, but I got it at an estate sale, and that was the first way I saw Eraserhead, was that way.
Honestly, finding it in like a collector's bin somewhere, that's a really great way to watch this. Renting it would be good.
Yeah.
But the experience of a DVD with some of his interviews, maybe some of his shorts put on it, really kind of rounds the Eraserhead experience.
Yeah, definitely pick up the Criterion one if you can.
Yeah.
Also, the only DVD I have that has a TV configuration menu to like...
I kind of like it.
I kind of do too, but it's kind of weird.
It is kind of weird, but okay.
Well, also on top of that, this Blu-ray is a... director approved. Yes. So he had some say as like
he did.
We're gonna put a color corrector on this.
Yeah, and I don't know if we've mentioned this whole thing's done in black and white. I don't know if we ever mentioned that. This whole thing is black and white, and it is a very specific black and white. It's not just like, oh, we filmed it and it happened to be in black and white, or we later on color corrected it to black and white. Like, he was very invested in the filming technique that he used to get this color. Yeah,
it's not like how on the Parasite Criterion release, they have the black and white cut, which is just a reskinning, and it's just kind of...
No, and the black and white feels good for this film, because it puts it weirdly timelessly. Like, knowing that it was made in 1977 is nice, but honestly, like, I don't care when this was made, because the color doesn't change, the ratio doesn't change, the grunginess doesn't fade or become aged in any way, because it's, a papier-mâché head on the ground sort of thing. So, like, I think that all works. I think part of the reason... Well, hi. I think part of the reason why I like that there's this extra, like, ratio to it is because Eraserhead feels like the kind of movie that if you're still that person like me who's hanging on to that old tube TV, this is the movie for you.
Actually, I think that would probably be the best way to watch this, would be on a tube TV.
If you lick it and it tastes like static, this is it.
Yeah, because it adds that just like that extra level of like, it makes me think of that Max Headroom piracy thing. Yeah. Where, like, there's just that like little level of grunge to it. That's
it adds just a little bit, and it also feels a little bit like, sure, I'm sure Lynch wants this scene in theaters. Like, that's kind of like the obvious answer, but at the same time, he feels like the kind of guy to be like, I still have my old VHS tapes, why don't you?
That's the exact reason he has the color correction thing on it, is because he's like, there's a little blurb on it that like, televisions aren't normally configured for this, so I provided this so that way you can correct it.
Yes.
Please do that before watching.
And like, honestly, because of what this is, any other movie, I don't think I'd really give it the time. Maybe on the first watch. Yeah. The second watch, I might go through and go ahead and do all the setup and all that. but Eraserhead feels special.
Yeah.
And I don't really know how to explain why.
I don't know either. I mean, there is something to it. Like, there's just that, it has that specific oomph, that like... That
je ne sais quoi.
And I think part of it also deals with when we're watching, which I'll actually get into that. There is something to that. And I think it deals specifically with that.
Okay.
And I'll get into that because that was my going into viewing Eraserhead for the first time. But after its initial release, where Eraserhead actually found like its like little niche was at the midnight features.
Which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Where it, at the Cinema Village, it would run for a year.
Pretty good.
Libra Film, or after the Libra Film head director convinced the cinema to run it, as well as Eraserhead had a 99-week run at the New York's Waverly Cinema.
Hot damn.
A year-long run at the Roxy Theater in San Francisco, and its biggest contributor, which Lynch talks about ad nauseum,
yes,
is the LA Newark Theater that had a midnight screening for, depending on who says it, 3 or 4 years.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, every Friday, and what Lynch says, sold out seats.
Which, take with a grain of salt, but even if it was missing a few people, pretty good.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
As well, John Walters helped promote it when he was he was on a late night show, and instead of talking about his own film, he just raved about Eraserhead the whole time. For those unfamiliar with Walter's work, as I haven't seen any of his work, but I am familiar of it because it's in a similar genre. He did films such as Pink Flamingo.
Yes. Yeah. It's definitely one of those small crowd, similar artist sort of thing.
And another thing I think why Eraserhead hits at home for a lot of people is because the fact that it was spread by word of mouth, which is how I got into it.
Yeah.
And I apologize for the cicadas. I cannot edit them out.
It is summer.
It has that very DIY production value to it that, I mean, we ourselves show it, and a lot of our favorite podcasts have started off as very DIY, just people doing their own thing. Like, what's that one you keep trying to get me to listen to? The one you just told me about today.
Night Vale is a little bit more productioned than this.
Okay.
That one is a story of a podcast.
This is a story of a movie.
That's true. Once you get into it, you'll see what I mean.
Okay. But there's something to it of, like, people having the freedom to do what they want.
Definitely.
And especially with film in the 70s, like, that was a harder thing to do because we didn't really have the direct-to-video until the late 80s, early 90s. Like,
yeah, it wasn't much of a thing. Yeah,
to, like, actually get a film into theaters, there was still a process, and especially, like, an art house film like this.
Definitely. I think the other reason why Eraserhead works better as an at-home film, or even a small art theater, than, like, if it had gone to mainstream media and it had been played everywhere, I don't think people would have responded the same.
Yeah.
And I think part of the reason of that is because Eraserhead requires a certain, like, moment for you to watch it. Like, it's not something that you can just show up at the theater and be like, oh, what should we watch tonight? Oh, Eraserhead's on. We'll watch that and then we'll go watch Lion King 3. Like, Eraserhead's something that you've heard about, people have whispered to you about, but no one can explain it to you. You've got a curiosity about it.
Yeah.
So you finally get your hands on it. You're going to watch it. And all you've been told is like, hey, go in open-minded.
It's exactly how I went into Cannibal Holocaust, and now it's one of my favorites.
Yeah. And I think that's what a lot of people experienced, and that's why it became the cult classic that it is. Like, it to the point where people have said, like, oh, this movie, Eraserhead, is an important cultural piece. Yeah. And, like, does it embody cultures of the 70s? No, it doesn't embody any culture other than the fact that this is, like, an introspective look that everyone has. Yeah, it's its embodiment of specific themes. Yes. And that's the thing too, is very polarizing because despite its long run and great financial success for a very low budget film, there are many who dislike it, and but there are also some other people who really love it. And compared to surrealist works like Lloyd Rose of The Atlantic compared it to, I'm going to butcher this because it's French. Un chien à de loup or L'Edge d'Or. Sure.
which both of those are surrealist films directed by Louis Buñuel and were written by himself as well as Salvador Dali.
And the more mainstream name there is Salvador Dali. Most people have at least seen some of his work. They at least kind of remember him.
Yeah.
That's the level of eccentric that we're going with.
Yeah. I have seen Un Chien d'Andalou, which is it is surrealism to a T. Like, it's a weird movie.
Sure. I mean, that's what it was.
Fun fact, though, L'Age de whatever, it's French.
Okay.
Was one of the first sound films in French.
Wow.
In France.
Very fancy.
Yeah. But, I mean, I think there is something to it, because, so, a few nights, or a couple weeks ago, I was in Laffenstein's chat, and we were kind of going through, like, a couple of Lynch's movie, like, we were just chatting back and forth. I think it was actually an off-stream. Yeah, no, it was an off-stream thing. Where, like, we were talking about, like, Lynch and Tarantino, and just, like, how their works are a little bit self-masturbatory in the way that Lynch can look like he's a bit, if you go into it and, like, you think that, oh, he's trying to be clever for his own sake, like, he kind of holds himself a little higher. The more you listen to, like, him talk, Lynch doesn't have that, whereas, like, Tarantino is like, look at all these movie references I have.
Yes, and I think part of it is Tarantino makes films for other people to see. Whereas, especially with Eraserhead, and with the first couple of his movies and a lot of his shorts, Lynch made movies for himself.
Yeah.
Like, and it wasn't even like, oh, I want to watch this, I'm sure someone else does. It was more of like, hey, I've had this thing in my head, and the only way I can, like, get it out is if we just make a movie. Oh,
yeah. Well, so there's this weird thing where, like, Lynch has kind of created some pop culture stuff, whereas
definitely
Tarantino in a way revives it, because I learned recently, and I wish I'd known this for our Shrek episode, the O-Ren theme from Kill Bill, the dun dun dun.
Yeah.
That is actually the theme for Battles Without Honor and Humanity, and Tarantino turned it into pop culture again, because how many movies have that as, like, the readying up scene?
That's a good point.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Yeah. Side note, check out Laffenstein's. I keep doing the Frankenstein. Check out Laffenstein's stream. He is fantastic Dead by Daylight player in horror games. He's super fucking chill and positive dude. I've had great talks with him on random movie shit. So
fun.
Yeah, I not necessarily on stream, but like it's fun. But back to Eraserhead. Contemporarily, there's been a lot of positive views of it. Like, it seems more positive now than when it first came out.
Definitely.
Because supposedly, like, when he worked on his next film, Eraserhead, like, Lynch met Stanley Kubrick.
It's pretty big news.
Yeah, who supposedly told him, like, Eraserhead was one of his favorite movies and served as influence when he wanted to put the cast and crew into a certain mood for The Shining.
I can see
the
little bits from The Shining.
Yeah, but
or in The Shining.
Yeah, because The Shining had, like, a bunch of layers where, like, Kubrick did a bunch of stuff like that.
Well, and The Shining is undoubtedly Kubrick's work. Like, that is a masterpiece in its own sense.
Yeah.
But you can see where he could have gotten, a few pieces from Eraserhead and gone, that unhinged look right there. That level of distant eyes, that level of depression stare, that all make, like, I want that level of inspiration here.
Yeah, no, I can see it too now, and it's fascinating. Because, like, H.R. Giger, a Swiss surrealist painter who is best known in the West, or in the world, for his design of the xenomorphs for the Alien franchise.
Of course.
He also thought it was one of the best films he ever made. Apparently,
it definitely resonates with people.
Yeah, I mean, I love Giger.
Yes.
I love his shit.
I do too.
But, like, apparently he wanted to work on something with Lynch, but Lynch wasn't a fan of Giger.
Well, and it's one of those things where, like,
you have these two guys who are, like, so good at what they do, and they have their own visions that they just...
It wouldn't have worked like they wanted.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, I completely can see it.
Yeah. And also, Eraserhead has been credited as having influence on one of my favorite fucking movies of all time, and I want to get to this at some point, Tetsuo the Iron Man.
Yes.
Which, for those who haven't listened, we do mention this briefly in our history of Japanese cyberpunk portion of our Akira episode.
Akira.
Early episode for
Yeah.
us. But I thought the history portion was great. So if you get a chance to check that one out, cool. But it also was inspirations for Begotten, which is this weird indie horror film that I haven't seen yet. And Aronofsky's debut film, Pi.
Yes, which was very good.
I still haven't seen that one yet.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot, but I haven't seen a lot.
Yes, that's okay.
Yeah. And in 2004, Eraserhead was selected for preservation in the National Film Registry up in the many halls along with Shrek.
As it belongs.
Yes. And, I mean, this was the start of Lynch. He would go...
Yeah, no, this really did, like, solidify him as a filmmaker, which is weird because he was still in school. Like,
Yeah.
But at the same time, he was above school.
Yeah, he was one of those guys who he feels like he went to school as a formality.
Yeah, he was there because someone told him he needed to be.
Yeah.
Or like, you know, shits and giggles, why not? Let's go see what's about.
Yeah, and another interesting thing about this, despite it being low budget and Lynch living on
set.
living on set, living on scraps, like repairing roofs, just doing odd jobs to make ends meet, Lynch made sure he paid his actors.
Yeah.
And they still got ancillary checks before that was even common practice.
Yeah.
So he was, and that's one thing I find fascinating about Lynch is because despite like his highbrow kind of
my goodness.
Good timing, Charlie. Highbrow, weirdly intelligent thought processes.
Mm-hmm.
He is humbling. When you listen to him talk and stuff, he is just a dude.
Oh, for sure.
He's just but he also knows he's a weird dude.
Yes, that he does.
But I mean, at the end, Lynch has stated that also no critic has ever met what the film means to him, and I applaud Lynch for keeping that to himself.
Yeah.
Unlike some other directors. But on that, and that's how I kind of every time I rewatch Eraserhead, I go into that.
Yeah, definitely.
Because I know I'm not watching it for what Lynch wanted it to be.
Yeah.
I'm watching it for what I want it to be. And that's kind of how I like to go into a lot of movies, is just like, what did I get from this? And then reflect back sometimes, did it hit what the director wanted? If the director has a vision. But there's just that something to Lynch and specifically Eraserhead, that just...
It's repeatable.
Yeah.
It's a repeatable experience, which is, especially for a film that's meant to make you reflect upon yourself.
Yeah.
It's hard to have a film that makes you rethink itself every single time you watch it.
Yeah.
Even if you watch it literally back to back like we've done.
Yeah. Well, and so the thing is, when I went into Eraserhead the first time, I watched it, and I saw it as a man struggling with the future of fatherhood.
Uh-huh.
A very scary time, but I've learned that Eraserhead is even more, in my opinion, complicated than that, and that's why it makes it so compelling. Because at its core, Eraserhead is a film about about a film of uncertainties, just not necessarily of be it fatherhood, but just as being a man in general in a cold world.
Yeah.
Because fatherhood is scary, but his last place of solitude, and I think this last almost 2 years now, has kind of cemented this idea of solitude as being this scary place to be, especially someone who honestly, before I didn't leave my apartment a lot, but even now, so I don't leave it a lot.
Yeah.
Even though I have nature around me, it's still very much looking out of a vignette into
yes. Yeah, I can see what
suburbia
you mean.
Outside of me.
Definitely. I can understand that.
Yeah. And I mean, that's for me, that's what Eraserhead is. It's this complicated movie about solitude and manhood.
Sure. I see this film, and every time I watch it, there's a different part that you know, it could branch off like, especially with which words I choose to describe it with.
Yeah.
But when I watch this film, a lot of the times I see it as a person introspectively struggling with a depression that we don't normally see on film. And because there's the usual film depression is like, oh, I can't get out of bed, I'm tired, I'm lethargic, and this feels like a person who has gone so far in that hole that they no longer feel. Yeah. They no longer have the fear that they once did, but that fear is still there, that is still a present thing. They no longer find solace in their room like they used to. They no longer find other people interesting or engaging or part of what they want. Yeah. And so each time I watch it, a different part of that resonates to whatever you're in the feeling for. Exactly.
And I think part of it for me in this viewing was that I'd recently heard something that Chris Rock said, that only women, children, and dogs are loved unconditionally. A man is only loved under the condition that he provides something.
Yeah. And whether or not you agree with that quote, I do think that quote represents Eraserhead nicely.
Yeah, and specifically Jack's character. Not saying that he's like a pure bastion for an innocent man, because he fetishizes his neighbor.
Yeah, no, he's definitely not like I would argue not even like a good person. No. But like, it's definitely that he's struggling with something.
Yeah, but he's struggling, but he can't, like, his one space of comfort has been technically invaded by his own actions too.
Yeah, like, he's definitely a product of his own actions and inactions.
Yeah,
but like,
he's a normal person reaching out for affection and comfort, and there's nothing around him. It's a cold world.
Sure, and I can see that.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of it too, but also at the same time, I see Eraserhead as a commentary of the struggles of just humans in general, and a commentary of organic beings living within a manufactured and just heavily constructed world. Sure. Because like we see that in cities with depression hitting hard. Oh yeah. Where like people, even people who live like where like I and a couple of our other friends live, we're kind of in the country a little bit. Like, I go 2 blocks over and there's a barn.
Oh yeah.
But like, there's still that need to go back to nature.
Oh, for sure. And I think the very first time I watched Eraserhead, I watched it as like a person who was uncomfortable in their own head. I don't even think I registered this film as like having any part in the real world. Yeah. I think I registered the whole thing as like him retrospecting his own like mind palace in a way. Yeah. And so like the first time I watched this, I totally saw this as a man dealing with his own anxieties about parts of himself. Each character a part of himself, each room a part of himself. And that view has changed as I watched it. Now I see it more as a reflection of his own space.
Well, and I mean, I think it also, like we said, Eraserhead is one of those movies where you view it 1 year and then you come back a couple years later and things have changed and it's completely different. And I think for me too, just expanding upon like the fears of fatherhood, not that I'm being a father, but like many of our friends are having kids now. Oh, and like seeing that little bit of uncertainty and like their demeanor and like the slight change in their...
Yeah. I mean, it's a big life change and you don't know how to handle it. And this movie is a way to reflect on it.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where we talked about it a little bit before recording that, like, if you were having a kid, this would probably be a harder movie to watch.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
But, yeah. I mean, I don't know. It's an interesting retrospective, and it's a fascinating debut film that started off as a student film.
Yes. Yeah. And I think this is a film that part of the reason why it resonates with so many different people isn't just the ability for you to look at it and see a different thing no matter who you are, or even when you see it, or be able to change your mind like we have. I think part of the reason why so many people get to connect to this film in a way that they don't connect to other surrealist art is because this one has recognizable elements. Whereas a lot of surrealist work, like, I love surrealist work. It's a part of me that I have to accept, that I get to go to the museum by myself. Yeah. Because it's not, I mean, it's popular in certain circles, but it's not the most popular. Classical is definitely something everyone can talk about. It's easy to talk about. Yeah. Eraserhead hits that level of art for a lot of people that they don't get to experience with others.
It's that borderline that surrealism hits where it's recognizable and you can start pulling themes out without being abstract, someone jizzed all over a wall and called it art.
Exactly. And I think part of the reason why...
Self-masturbatory artwork.
Sure, that's one way to put it. But I think part of the reason why Eraserhead as an art piece works unlike those work is not just because it's recognizable, but because it's something that enough people have seen that people can talk about it.
Yeah.
It's hard to have everyone, or even people who aren't really into surrealism or into this like retrospective and intro thought art. It's hard to be like, hey, you want to come to the museum and like spend 4 hours talking with me about this like one painting.
Yeah.
That's a commitment.
Yeah.
I will give people that. That is a commitment. But have you seen Eraserhead? And if someone, even if they saw it years ago, says yes, well, now you've got something to go with.
Yeah, it's
like,
something to re-explore.
It's accessible.
Yeah,
it's a very accessible form of this art, which I really, really like.
Yeah.
It's almost a gateway movie, but not quite.
Yeah, it's just missing that, like, a little bit to, like, it's not a, like, honestly, I would probably introduce someone to Tetsuo the Iron Man before I would this.
Oh, for sure.
Because
this isn't something that you readily go around telling everyone you know, like, hey, this is a great movie. This is something that you find out about someone years after you've known them and you go, I think you might want to watch this. Yeah.
And I mean, we had that too, because I was talking to your husband about it last night for Lads Night when we were watching Sports Ball. That he didn't watch it because you convinced him out of it because you know it's not a movie for him.
No, because he likes art, but he likes the sort of art where you're seeing a realistic thing out of something else, like making a sculpture out of garbage. He likes, or like pointillism art. He likes that sort of thing. He likes sculptures to an extent, but having to sit for over an hour with your own thoughts while watching a man struggle with his own isn't something that he would watch and appreciate that he watched. Yeah. It would be something that he would watch because I asked him to.
Yeah, because I think we both ended up describing it to him as like, because I had to turn him away from 2001: A Space Odyssey for a while, solely because he complains about the quiet between stuff.
He likes action a lot more than he likes thought movies.
And we got him to watch 2001: A Space Odyssey and he loved it. But he kind of complained about, like, or did not complain, just didn't like the ending of it, like where it got really abstract and surreal. Yeah. And we explained to him that Eraserhead is like the end of 2001: A Space Odyssey, but the entire movie.
Yeah, just the ending part.
Yeah.
And for some of us, and I'm not saying that it's an all the time movie. Like, it's definitely something that I want to come to every once in a while when I'm in that headspace for some retrospective thought. Yeah. But it's definitely, I don't know, it's weird because I do think eventually I will recommend it to him to watch. Yeah. I think eventually he will be at a spot in his movie watching and in his own head where I can say, like, hey, you come a long way with, like, the ideas and, like, the just accepting of movies and images. Yeah. Now would be a good time to start getting into this sort of thing. And Eraserhead might be a good, like, first big step there. Yeah. But if you're already not, like, if you already go into a modern art, like, place or in a modern art building, and you're like, wow, what even is this? This is garbage. This is not the movie for you. No. This will not resonate with you. This will just feel weird. You will feel gross, and you won't have the, like, connection to Lynch that you're meant to get. Yeah, no, and I think we both hit on it that, I mean, because normally we end the podcast with, would you recommend? And I think we've hit on that, like, it's a very situational recommend for both of us. And even then, I think the true beauty of this movie is that no one recommends it to you. You find Eraserhead yourself. Yeah. You eventually run across it. Eventually the imagery that you see every year when Halloween rolls around, and you go, is that really a horror movie? Why is this on the poster? Yeah. Because unfortunately no one knows where to put it.
Yeah, because I mean, it is a horror film, but it's not. It's not a conventional horror film. It's kind of like how
it's a mind fuck in a way.
Yeah, it's. I don't know. It's parts of it kind of remind me of like Event Horizon a little bit, where like it's this weird abstraction of what horror is supposed to be.
It's horror in the most natural sense of like it is the embodiment of the feeling of horror. It is not giving you horror. Yeah. Like, it is not there to arouse horror in you. It is there for you to recognize what horror looks and feels like to you. Yep. And so that's kind of why, like, I don't really want to say, do I recommend this? Because I want you to find this yourself. Yeah. I want you to find it when you need to find it, when you're ready to find it. And then welcome to the cult of Eraserhead.
Well, I hope you've watched it before the episode, but...
Yeah, like, if not, spoilers, hi, sorry.
I hope, like, as many of our episodes, when we review these older movies, is that it's just a reason for you to go back and re-watch, re-review, reanalyze a movie, because things do change. Oh, definitely. I mean, it's
and
just...
if you've already seen Eraserhead once and you're like, I didn't like it. Yeah. It didn't make sense to me. Maybe now's the time to go back to it. Yeah. Because honestly, like, that's probably where a lot of people the general population who ended up watching Eraserhead because they had the friend who got them to go and they saw it. You didn't like it. Maybe now's a good time to come back to it. Yeah. Maybe now that you know what to expect and are ready for that, I think the second watching of Eraserhead is like peak Eraserhead.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. And I mean, I'm honestly gonna come back to it in another couple of years or so. Just give it a little time and see how.
Honestly, Eraserhead's one of those movies that I watch every time something big in the world happens. Once, like, my feelings for how the world is on fire has shifted, I usually come back to it because I don't know, it gives a weird, like, sense of purpose to my big feelings that I can't explain.
And kind of like a weird... And I think part of it is in how it ends, too. Because, one, it's very much so the man putting the brakes on the planet and it breaking apart. Yeah. As well as... Henry killing the thing he creates and like realizing, oh, he fucked up, and that's why his world's been put on hold twice. Yes, it's just these big life altering moments that having to go back and rediscover something about yourself that you didn't know was there.
And it ends with all of these big moments, which is part of the reason why I come back to it whenever I feel like something big has happened. But it also ends weirdly with this sense of like relief. Yeah. Like, it doesn't leave you hanging with this thought of like, oh gosh, he's killed the world, he's killed the baby. It ends in a hug. Yeah. And like, you don't really know if it's a good hug, if it's a permanent hug. It just ends in a hug. Yeah. Which, I don't know.
Sometimes that's all you need.
I feel like the big feelings should all end in a hug.
Well, I mean, I think that ties into the themes is that Henry is in a world that's cold to him, and that's all he wants is
a hug.
A human connection.
From not a sperm baby.
I mean...
From E.T. the slime ball.
Them sperms got muscular tendrils.
Oh god, it's weird looking. But, I mean, that's part of why it sticks in people's heads. If it hadn't been weird looking, would you remember it? No. Yeah, me neither.
It would just be another movie with a bunch of splooge.
Yeah, and I watch a lot of weird sploogey movies. But Eraserhead, the imagery, every year, it rolls itself back around to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting film.
It is. That's the best way to put it. It's an interesting film.
Interesting. Watch it. Make whatever you want of it. Yeah. It's personal.
It is.
I doubt we got it right. I mean, it's...
I know I got it wrong. But that's the best part about this film is knowing that you're wrong.
Yeah, definitely. So...
Yeah.
Anywho, this has been The Good, the Bad, and the Weird.
Thanks for listening.
Peace.